What's up everybody, Travag here. Today we're going to be looking at the HD client in Runelite, how to get it, how to change your settings to work best with your computer, and how to make the overworld just look great. If you don't have the plugin, Plugin Hub 117 HD by 117, you're going to install that one. Let's go over the settings. Draw distance is very much preferential. You could see farther, but it's going to affect your GPU. I keep it to 65. Play around with what you think works here. Anti-Aliasing is actually very, very important for your GPU. You can see I'm currently running at 50%, 63 Celsius. If we turn this to 16, look what happens to my GPU. I didn't notice much of a difference in the world, but we can see here, there's a pretty big spike. Unless you have a really good computer, I would go with either 8 or 4 because it's going to take the load off your GPU and it's not really going to make much of a difference. Anisotropic Filtering I have set to 1. You'll notice this affects like trees in the background and whatnot. 2, you get a little bit more detail, and then some of the other ones you don't really notice too much of a difference. This one is definitely preferential. Flashing effects is lightning, preferential. Saturation, contrast, and brightness. We're going to skip those for now. Level of detail, you know, you can go to full, you'll get the detail all the way in the back. But if you go to something like low, you get the details in front of you, but in the back, they're not as detailed. Dynamic lights, I really don't see a difference anywhere. I have it set to few. Projectile lights, NPC lights I have on. Atmospheric lighting is currently on, but I actually turned that off, and I'll show you in a second. It really affects brightness and contrast. Resolution and shadows, I love shadows. Without it, it just looks kind of bland. When you have it on, it looks amazing. Now, shadow resolution, this is something you'll want to play around with because it does affect your GPU. If you got a weaker computer, you can go with something like this. 4000 is where you start to get like the, decent level of detail. Shadow distance affects trees and shadows and buildings in the background. So if we go to like 20 here, you can see the shadows in the back have disappeared, where if we go to like 40, they start to appear, and if we go to 60, further ones start to appear. I have it set to 60. Monitor your GPU. 60 seems good, but if you start doing something like expanding your shadow draw, and that kind of goes to outer limits, this is where it starts to affect my GPU sometimes, so I have that toggled off. Fog depth mode and fog depth doesn't really work right now. When you change it, it glitches, so I just have those set to dynamic and 0. These here, just choose on what you want. You got your color, you can go with black. I like blue. These you'll definitely want on because without it, you start losing some really good textures. Let's go back to saturation, contrast, and brightness. So some people have moved this to lower to kind of make it look less toonish and less oversaturated. I keep it on default, and instead I've been doing brightness to darker, and that kind of does both. But there's a reason why I do brightness to darker, and that is because of atmospheric lighting. So here's an area where atmospheric lighting is taking effect. If we actually turn it off here, it takes about 2 or 3 seconds to take effect, but you can see the hill and everything in the distance. I could start seeing more. Now, where it really impacts is when we're underground here. If we turn it off, we can see over a couple seconds it brightens up. It looks a little bit more old school too. Now you can actually see, so look at the chest in the background, for example. When we turn it on, I mean, it looks really good, but that is very dark in my opinion. Now you could argue when you turn this off, it becomes a little too bright. So this is where I've actually changed this to darker. With darker brightness, I get a good compromise of somewhere in the middle. It also affects the overworld very well. If we turn on atmospheric lighting, it's not going to do anything here because this is an area that doesn't get affected by it. But if we go between brightness, there's your natural default and there's your darker. I personally love darker. You could even go darkest if you want. If you turn this off, you could see here, it starts to brighten up. But if you want it to kind of still be a little moody, you can switch this to darker. And here's Winter Todd. If we turn this off, you can see it brightens up. You go to darker, and there's kind of the middle. It's not as blue. Here's default. It definitely looks pretty saturated and pretty toony, and then darker is there. So once again, darker just affecting the overworld and the underworld pretty well with atmospheric lighting off. And that is it for the settings for HD Runelite. This is how you're going to get the best overall look everywhere in the map. If this video was helpful, please leave a like. Take care. Bye.